Hello, I'm Nigel Warburton, and this is a podcast of my book, Philosophy the Classics. Further details of this book and others I've written are available at www.virtualphilosopher.org. Boethius, the Consolation of Philosophy. As the Consolation of Philosophy opens, Boethius is in a prison cell, bemoaning his condition. He wants to die. He has nothing to hope for. Fortune, who gave him his wealth and freedom, has now taken both away. Then, as he's giving vent to his sorrow in the form of a poem, he becomes aware of a woman standing over him. Her height seems to fluctuate from average size to immeasurably tall. Her dress is embroidered at the bottom of the hem with the Greek letter pi, and at the top the letter theta. In between is embroidered a ladder. Her dress is torn in places. She carries some books and a sceptre. This woman is philosophy personified. The letter pi stands for practical philosophy, including ethics. The letter theta stands for contemplative philosophy, that is, metaphysics and science. This woman, philosophy, rebukes Boethius for forsaking her. Through her dialogue with Boethius, she offers him the consolation he's seeking. Although he has been unjustly condemned to death and has lost his great wealth, his reputation, and the comforts of freedom, she points out the inner strength that she, philosophy, can give him. She diagnoses his despair and provides soothing medicine in the form of reason. Philosophy in this form is a kind of self-help, a consolation to the mind. Boethius even sometimes refers to philosophy as his nurse. As far as we can tell, the Consolation of Philosophy was written around the year 524, while Boethius was imprisoned in Pavia, awaiting execution for an alleged act of treason against the Gothic emperor Theoderic. This was a dramatic fall from eminence. Boethius had been one of the most respected and honoured members of Theoderic's government. Boethius was subsequently tortured and bludgeoned to death, an ignominious way to die that a citizen of his standing might have hoped to have avoided. Although he published other books on a wide range of subjects, including music, and translated a substantial part of Aristotle's works into Latin, it's for the Consolation of Philosophy, his last work, that he's now remembered. It's a compelling book, written in a mixture of prose, poetry, and dialogue. During the medieval and Renaissance periods, it was one of the most widely read books. Chaucer translated it, as did Elizabeth I. Its philosophical content is not wholly original, but the manner in which the ideas are communicated makes it an entertaining as well as a stimulating book to read. Philosophy. Philosophy, personified as a woman, as we've seen, comes to visit Boethius in his prison cell. But what did Boethius mean by philosophy? He was a Neo-Platonist, that is, his view of philosophy was deeply influenced by Plato's. In particular, he followed Plato in believing that philosophical contemplation takes us away from the misleading world of appearances to a true experience of reality. He repeatedly uses the image of the shadowy world of appearances, which is contrasted with the light of truth. This is an allusion to Plato's image of the sun as the symbol of the form of the good in the parable of the cave that Plato uses in the Republic. Philosophy teaches Boethius, or rather reminds him, that as a philosopher he should be immune from the effects of good or bad fortune. The fact that philosophy jogs Boethius's memory is probably meant, again, as an allusion to a doctrine of Plato's, the view that knowledge is a kind of recollection. Chance and happiness. A true philosopher is impervious to chance. The wheel of fortune inevitably turns, and those who are at the top find themselves very soon at the bottom. That is the nature of fortune, to be fickle. In fact, philosophy tells him it's when she is adverse that fortune best serves humanity. Good fortune dupes us because it gives us the illusion of true happiness, but when fortune takes off her mask and shows us how treacherous she can be, that is when we learn most. Adversity teaches us the frailty of the sorts of happiness that wealth, fame, and pleasure can inspire. It teaches us which of our friends are true friends. Boethius had indeed been blessed with good fortune. His 2 sons were made consuls on the same day as a public demonstration of gratitude for his contribution to the running of the state. His imprisonment, though, takes his happiness away. Philosophy tells him that he is being foolish. True happiness can't be found in anything that is governed by chance, such as wealth or fame. Here, Boethius is influenced by aspects of Stoicism, a philosophy which emphasizes the need for equanimity in the face of external trouble. For a Stoic, happiness comes from inner resources and is immune to the effects of chance and misfortune. Evil and reward. Boethius laments the fact that there doesn't seem to be justice in the world. Evil people often flourish, while the good and virtuous suffer. In response, philosophy claims that it's the virtuous who are truly rewarded, since they have the power to attain the ultimate end, genuine happiness, through their pursuit of good. The evil only appear to flourish. In fact, by abandoning their reason, they become subhuman and are more deserving of pity and remedial treatment than of retributive punishment. God and free will. Having reminded Boethius that true happiness, which everyone seeks, comes from philosophical contemplation, not from fame, fortune, or pleasure, and that, despite appearances, the wicked cannot genuinely flourish, philosophy engages him in debate about God and human free will. Here the book becomes a serious philosophical dialogue in the style of Plato's dialogues. Boethius takes on the role of questioner, and philosophy explains the nature of God to him, leading him with the aid of reason away from mere appearances to a world of purity and light. Much of the discussion focuses on the question of how humans could have free will, the capacity for genuine choice over what they do, and yet at the same time there could be a God who knows in advance precisely what they will in fact do. Without free will there cannot be rational action. Yet, if God can see what we're going to do, it's not at all clear in what sense we're genuinely free to exercise choice. Philosophy's answer to this conundrum in part turns on the distinction between predestination and foreknowledge. Those who believe in predestination argue that God has brought it about that certain events will inevitably happen in the future. Foreknowledge is simply knowing in advance what will happen. Philosophy argues that God's knowing that certain choices will be made does not cause those things to happen. Human beings can still make choices, so divine foreknowledge is compatible with genuine choice for humans, since knowing what will happen does not predestine it to happen. And yet it might seem that if God knows in advance what we'll choose, our apparent choice is an illusion, not really free will, but the fantasy of it. Philosophy's response to this line of criticism is that our idea of foreknowledge erroneously, but understandably, rests on human experience of time. But God is not like us in important respects. In particular, God is outside time and lives in an eternal present. Because God stands outside time, his foreknowledge is comparable to our knowledge of the present. Past, present and future are all as one to him. Our perception of what is happening now doesn't make what is happening happen. Nor then does God's foreknowledge wipe out the possibility of genuine free choice about what we do. Our mistake is to think of God's relation to time as like our own. God is aware of everything that has happened, is happening, and will happen. Philosophy ends the book by exhorting Boethius to virtue, since he is living in the sight of a judge who, from a position outside time, sees and knows everything. Thus, in the Consolation of Philosophy, Boethius's intellectual journey retraces the path of the philosopher in Plato's Republic. Boethius leaves behind the shadowy world of appearances, the equivalent of the flickering shadows on the wall of the cave, and achieves knowledge of the form of the good, and ultimately of God. Criticism of the Consolation of Philosophy. Rationalization. Boethius's celebration of everything that is insulated from the effects of chance might be seen as a rationalization. Given that he was in prison and facing torture and almost certain execution with no hope of retrieving his former wealth and public esteem, it's hardly surprising he should celebrate rational activity above all else. Nothing else significant is left to him. Perhaps his rejection of wealth and fame as significant elements in a life that goes well is just the self-serving argument of a desperate man. Even if it's true that Boethius saw the overriding value of rational deliberation because little else was left to him, it doesn't follow that he was wrong. The truth of the matter is independent of his motivation for believing it. An alternative interpretation is that Boethius was jolted from his complacency by having everything he thought valuable removed. Only then could he come to understand, or rather recollect, philosophy's powerful message. Only then could he return to the austere vision of self-sufficient happiness that philosophy teaches. This interpretation is supported in the text by philosophy's insistence that adversity can draw people back to the true way of goodness, whereas the external trappings of success can lure them into believing that they've achieved true happiness. So even if Boethius's motivation for believing what philosophy taught him was suspect, it does not follow that her message is in error. What would be devastating to philosophy's doctrine, however, would be the discovery that in fact wealth, fame, and other worldly goods are the essential part of happiness. Aristotle, for example, believed that a certain amount of wealth and having children of one's own were important ingredients in happiness. If he was right, then Boethius's attempt to gain true consolation from philosophy alone was destined to failure.